Welcome to Keith Knight Don't Tread on Anyone and the Libertarian Institute. This is a letter written from Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World, to George Orwell, the author of 1984. Brief introduction to the two books. Orwell's dystopian vision of the future described in his classic novel, 1984, is based on totalitarian suppression, which does not recoil from physical violence to suppress people's freedoms. In Huxley's Brave New World, on the other hand, this is no longer necessary. The Brave New World scenario is primarily based on psychological manipulation of the masses. Physical violence is obsolete because human behavior is controlled at the most fundamental level, at the level of psychology and genetics. The latter strategy is much more efficient, less costly in energetic terms, and therefore more effective and economic. The physical concept of the path of least resistance and psychological reactance. Here is a transcript of the letter dated October 21st, 1949. Dear Mr. Orwell, it was very kind of you to tell your publishers to send me a copy of your book. It arrived as I was in the midst of a piece of work that required much reading and consulting of references, and since poor sight makes it necessary for me to ration my reading, I had to wait a long time before being able to embark on 1984. Agreeing with all that the critics have written of it, I need not tell you yet once more how fine and how profoundly important the book is. May I speak instead of the thing with which the book deals, the ultimate revolution? The first hints of a philosophy of the ultimate revolution, the revolution which lies beyond politics and economics, and which aims at total subversion of the individual's psychology and physiology, are to be found in Marquis de Sade, who regarded himself as the continuator and the consummator of Robespierre and Babeuf. The philosophy of the ruling minority in 1984 is a sadism which has been carried to its logical conclusion by going beyond sex and denying it. Whether in actual fact the policy of the boot on the face can go on indefinitely seems doubtful. My own belief is that the ruling oligarchy will find less arduous and wasteful ways of governing and of satisfying its lust for power, and these ways will resemble those which I described in Brave New World. I have had occasion recently to look into the history of animal magnetism and hypnotism, and have been greatly struck by the way in which for 150 years the world has refused to take serious cognizance of the discoveries of Mesmer, Braid, Esdaile, and the rest. Partly because of the prevailing materialism, and partly because of prevailing respectability, 19th century philosophers and men of science were not willing to investigate the odder facts of psychology for practical men, such as politicians, soldiers, and policemen, to apply in the field of government. Thanks to the voluntary ignorance of our fathers, the advent of the ultimate revolution was delayed for 5 or 6 generations. Another lucky accident was Freud's inability to hypnotize successfully, and his consequent disparagement of hypnotism. This delayed the general application of hypnotism to psychiatry for at least 40 years. But now, psychoanalysis is being combined with hypnosis, and hypnosis has been made easy and indefinitely extensible through the use of barbiturates, which induce a hypnoid and suggestible state in even the most recalcitrant subjects. Within the next generation, I believe that the world's rulers will discover that infant conditioning and narco-hypnosis are more efficient as instruments of government than clubs and prisons, and that lust for power can be just as completely satisfied by suggesting people into loving their servitude as by flogging and kicking them into obedience. In other words, I feel that the nightmare of 1984 is destined to modulate into the nightmare of a world having more resemblance to that which I imagined in Brave New World. The change will be brought about as a result of a felt need for increased efficiency. Meanwhile, of course, there may be a large-scale biological and atomic war, in which case we shall have nightmares of other and scarcely imaginable kinds. Thank you once again for the book. Yours sincerely, Aldous Huxley. Thank you for watching Keith Knight Don't Tread on Anyone in the Libertarian Institute.
No, but that's basically the caricature of us in the mainstream media, that we only care about ourselves and we're radical individualists and this and that. But look, every one of us has a family. A lot of us have kids, and I don't say to my kids, hey, it's every man for himself, kid. You cook your own filet mignon or whatever. No one would act that way. And so this is a caricature, because I find that in general, people who are really, really opposed to us almost never know anything about us. They've never read anything about us. They always mention Ayn Rand. They haven't even read Ayn Rand, but that's the one name they know. Maybe they know Milton Friedman. Then I give them 2 points if they know Milton Friedman. But they really don't know anything. And so they honestly think that that's our view, that there isn't such a thing as, like, they'll think that it's a real comeback against us to say, hey, you don't forget, we live in a society. Oh, Matt, did you know we live in a society? Of course we know we live in a society. That's why we're against the state, because the state disrupts the normal, healthy interactions of human beings that comprise society, because the state by its nature, pits society against itself. So this COVID thing, now we're pitted against each other because some people wear masks and some don't, and now we're yelling at, you don't listen to science. This wouldn't have happened if that hadn't been politicized. Or then they'll say, well, this group gets a special subsidy and this industry gets this, so now we're pitted against each other because of that. And even when it gives money to foreign countries, there are countries that have been destabilized because one group is fighting with the other group about who gets the grant money. So it's because we like society and we like peace and normal human interaction that we're against the state. It's not that we're against society. Of course these schmucks want to confuse society and the state, because the state wants to take credit for all the good things we have in society. But I refuse to give them that credit. The state is a parasite that shows up later. Society is all the good things that we do spontaneously, and then the state takes credit for it. And then we're told if we're against the state, we're against society. I mean, it's like, if only these people if we could somehow give them 20 more IQ points, we wouldn't have to have this argument with them.